Hello, sword dude and dudettes. We have a big sword today. So this was very kindly sent to me for review, and we're just doing a kind of first impressions right now. This is the LK Chen Flying Cloud. It is a big sword. This is a two-handed Jian. So this is called Shuang Shou Jian. Shuang means double. And so there's Shuang Jian, which are paired Jian, but Shuang Shou, or double hand, is a two-handed Jian. And this is a kind of rare type of sword. We don't have very many surviving examples at all in the archaeological record of two-handed Jian, although they do exist. We do have a handful of them. And more importantly, this is one of the very few surviving types of sword manuals we have from the Ming period. So in the Ming, we have an example of a two-handed Jian Ming fencing manual. So that might be worth exploring in a future video. And LK Chen has reproduced this. This has got elements that share, especially in the hilt, have traditions that go all the way back even to the Song dynasty. And he has put together a sword that could have been used during the Ming. This is a little speculative because, again, this isn't based on a single find. This is based largely on artwork, I would say. And what he has created is a really, really fascinating sword. So it handles just very lively in the hand. It's light enough, it comes in just under 1,200 grams with this tremendous grip here. And if I just pause for a second, there are two kind of obvious swords to try and compare this Jian to. One would be the other types of two-handed Jian, and these are the large Jian that were used in the Han Dynasty. So LK Chen produces two models, the Striking Eagle and the Roaring Dragon. So this Roaring Dragon, you can see, is of a similar size to the Flying Cloud, but by comparison, the Han period sword has much less mass going on in the hilt. It's got a longer grip because it doesn't have a big pommel on the end, which this is the type of hilt that you usually see on greatswords. So this is a really big greatsword size hilt that you have a lot of leverage with. And it's necessary because this still has the old Warring States period type of cross-section, which means that this blade carries a lot of mass in it. So this feels like it's a kind of blade-heavy sword relative to this sword. Even though they're similar in absolute weight, this one feels like it's ready to be operated in a single hand. This one really feels like it wants to have two hands on it at all times. Two swords, similar size, similar mass, but very different distributions of how that mass is allocated. What about comparing it to a longsword? You can see compared to a average type of European longsword design, this is going to be on the longer side, and it's going to have a really big grip. It's going to have a pretty long hilt, but it's got very short cross compared to most European designs. This is typical of Chinese swords. The blade, just like a normal Chinese sword, is also reasonably long and narrow. It's not to say you can't find European swords that have narrow blades like this, but this is pretty narrow for its length for a European sword. This is the type of blade you'd find more on side swords and leaning towards some types of rapier. So compared to most long swords, this would seem like a lot of grip length, not a lot of hand protection, and would still be quite a long blade. But this is kind of taking it in the opposite direction that the Han period sword does. European swords often will have a concentration of mass with this big heavy pommel, with this big heavy grip, and have less going on out in the blade. It depends, of course. So the European sword oftentimes will have an even easier time operating in a single hand than the Chinese sword. So this is kind of going in the opposite direction. This falls somewhere in between the Han Dynasty two-handed sword and the European hand-and-a-half sword. So what we've ended up with is a really big, quite large sword. It's got the proportions of a two-handed sword, not quite a great sword, but somewhere slightly shorter than that, but it has the balance of a hand-and-a-half sword, which makes it easy to use in a single hand, and then when you want to, bring the other hand back on to be able to perform more powerful strikes. So again, I certainly haven't studied the Ming manual, but let's see how it performs in one-handed and two-handed strikes, shall we? That was too much power that I executed on it, but obviously it had no problem going through the target whatsoever. Batted that last one away. What about in a single hand? This is a fun sword. So it does have a little bit of play in the blade, so you have to be a little bit careful with your blade alignment. But you can see, even without a lot of power, just using a nice sweeping arc with that single-handed strike, it went through perfectly cleanly. The second strike, I think I flubbed the cut, so it went through kind of jagged. So what we have here is a really elegant sword that is very nimble in the hand. It has a forward pivot point that's right here at the tip of the blade, which means if you are using it single-handed, you can keep the point right in line with whoever you're fencing with. And the pivot point on the second part, way here in the back of the pommel, allows you to engage in wards and wind over the spear or the other sword that you're engaged in. So this is a really fun sword and would be a lot of fun to be able to fence with. We'll have to look at it in further detail in the next video. All right, guys, till next time, take care.